At the beginning of my journey, really helping expats and foreigners relocate to Germany, I was one of maybe 4 or 5 YouTubers online just talking about culture shocks, but somebody who's actually, diving in and helping people step by step relocate to Germany, who's not a relocation agent and not charging these huge dollars, to bring somebody over, but to teach you how to do it yourself. It just wasn't there. And it really was a niche that nobody had met yet. Like, I want to make a difference. I want to be here on this earth to actually change the way that other people live. That was exactly my hope, really, with life in Dusseldorf. I just didn't realize it was going to be this big. And I get every day now emails from people just being like, you don't realize how you as an individual changed my entire life. I tell them the worst parts about living in Germany, but I also tell them all of the amazing things being here. And I think this, for me, has been, game changing. I'm finally able to say that I've really made a huge difference in people's lives.
Welcome to a new episode of the Mind Echo podcast, where we are diving into the ideas, thoughts, stories of entrepreneurs, business leaders, as well as inspiring people shaping different industries in Germany. And today I'm really happy to welcome Jenna Davies to the podcast. Jenna is the founder of Life in Dusseldorf and Life in Germany. Those are two platforms that she built to support thousands of expats navigating their life, settling in Germany. She's originally from Toronto, Canada. She has a background in sport management, combining knowledge from the social and management sciences, as well also connecting to business topics. And she also has a certification on social media. She moved to Dusseldorf in 2016, and what actually started for her as a personal journey then became to the mission of helping others settle in the country, and she will explain more in a moment. So she also has a background in content creation, marketing, brand strategy. She worked as a travel blogger. She's lived in different countries before actually establishing into her current venture as an entrepreneur. So through Life in Germany, she has built a step-by-step relocation program, and she will explain about that in a moment. She has a really impressive follower base in YouTube with around or are about to be 70,000 subscribers and a community of more than 150,000 members across all channels. So her work has been featured in different networks like WDR, Lokalzeit, among others, and she's really continuing to connect expats with her knowledge, with a network of experts as well, while at the same time, and she was just mentioning that 1 second ago, balancing life as a mom of 2 as well. So having said that, really happy to have you on the podcast, Jenna. I'm not sure if you would like to also add. Hope all the facts were right. So
thank you so much for having me. I have to say, I don't think I've ever had such an amazing introduction about myself. So I'm just flattered right now. I'm like, wow, I did live in multiple countries.
Great. Yeah, no, then happy to hear that. Factually, it's all correct, and I would say let's dive into our conversation. So, first of all, what I just wanted to ask you is, I can imagine there are many things that are running in your mind every single moment, but I was just curious, what are the 2-3 topics that actually are in your focus right now, on top of your mind at the moment?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I always feel like I have the most insane mental load, as we mentioned. Having 2 kids on top of it. That's obviously top of mind. But when we're speaking business, we've actually got a lot of exciting things on the go right now, because I'm just really focused on restructuring. At the beginning of my journey, really helping expats and foreigners relocate to Germany, I was basically the only one doing it. I was one of maybe 4 or 5 YouTubers online just talking about culture shocks, but somebody who's actually, diving in and helping people step by step relocate to Germany, who's not a relocation agent and not charging these huge dollars, to bring somebody over, but to teach you how to do it yourself. It just wasn't there. So that was great. And this route was perfect for me. And it really was a niche that nobody had met yet. And every year goes by and you realize there's more and more people saturating this market, which is okay. It's great. Like, it's good to have all of this information for expats, and they're coming from all different, areas of expertise as well. But this year I've really decided to niche down and focus a lot on supporting families, because I get most of our questions coming through with families. So last week, actually earlier this week, I just launched, or let everybody know about my big plan of actually writing a children's book. Not just a children's book, but a series of children's books that help them integrate into Germany.
Okay,
Because
cool.
I've realized we've worked so hard, on getting these foreigners over here and finding them jobs, getting them visas and everything. When in reality, a lot of my one-on-one consultations are parents simply asking, how is life going to be here for my children? So that's definitely number one on my plate right now. And my biggest thing in my mind, my biggest focus on a day-to-day basis is building up this series of books and really working with the community to bring in these cultural aspects, not just from Canada, living here in Germany, but from all over the world. I'd say the next focus I have is the Life in Dusseldorf side. So that's the Life in Germany project. Life in Dusseldorf, I'm currently working on building up a family guide. And that basically is a Google Map list that organizes all these different activities and events for families organized by emojis on the Google Map so that they can just, click, okay, it's raining outside. Let's go check out some indoor activities and scroll in onto the map and find not just places in Dusseldorf, but all over Germany, in the Netherlands as well.
Well, okay.
So yeah, a lot of inspiration there. These are probably the two biggest projects right now on my mind. And then the third thing on my mind is honestly AI. It's just like, how can I use it? Because I understand how terrifying it can be, but I have to say I'm one of those people, like, either you use it or you're going to fall behind. So if I'm not focusing on those two projects, I'm focusing on, okay, what types of artificial intelligence can I use in order to give me more time with my family, in order to make my products better, and so that I can really focus on the things that I love most. Because if I'm being honest, I hate post-production. I make so many videos, but I hate editing them, So slowly finding tools that can help me in aspects that don't really show my true me, and my real talent. So, yeah.
All right, quite interesting. So, I mean, I already started to make some notes on the side to then connect to some of these points because I was not aware of them. So, really interesting.
Brand new.
And and the topic of AI, I didn't have a particular point, but now that you mentioned that, probably maybe we can address that in a moment later on. So, I think, like you were mentioning, so you basically start this journey, then you start building one part, the next one, then you have these two streams, plus how you can use one further enabler across these two streams. So really, when speaking also with different entrepreneurs, people driving their own business, it's really crazy to see how to really be able to prioritize by taking up all of these tasks. So how do you manage in general that? So how do you manage being able to prioritize within what's important now for the business?
I'm not going to lie, that's actually been something that I've always struggled with. And it's not that I'm actually a very, very organized person. So in terms of prioritizing, what I enjoy and the work that I want to get out there, that's very easy for me. It's also very, very easy for me to work the hours that I want to work. And then I put my phone away when I go pick up my kids, and that's it. Like this. I'm very, very well disciplined in that manner. However, when it comes to generating an income, that's really where it should be prioritized. And I've constantly struggled with the fact that income was never a priority for me. Obviously, the older I get, the more money you need having children.
Sure.
The more stress comes on me being like, okay, Jenna, you do have to earn an income. And that's actually a lot of why I chose to do these two massive projects this year, is because I have this huge following, and I've really nurtured these amazing communities that I have on all these different platforms. But I've never found a way to really monetize it properly and to give them something that I really think would benefit them. So that's hopefully going to be how I'm able to prioritize this year. But I have here, like in my drawer right now, 2 different mind maps of like, okay, this is what you're going to focus on. And this is how much time you're going to dedicate each day to each task. So I also learned a very interesting thing from a course that I recently took, that if you're creating content on the web that is not really driving sales for your business, then what are you doing? And for me, I've constantly always created content in order to grow and in order to connect with my community. But I never found a way to kind of connect it to also generating sales, right? And then I finally realized, okay, you don't have to be this cheesy saleswoman, to make those sales. You can also make it very natural. And so this is really what I've been working on this year. So hopefully I'm getting better.
Cool. So then I also back to one of the points later, because indeed that's something I wanted to ask you, the whole journey of actually monetizing a follower base. Because on the one hand, like you said, you're working regularly or daily to deliver value to that audience that you're close to. But at the same time, you also want to think, how can these really become into a sustainable business idea that you can grow further and further? Great, thanks for sharing that. But that was for me just to use it as one starting point to get like some further talking points for further down the conversation. But as I told you before, what I like to do on these conversations is not only go directly and ask you what's the business about, explain what's behind, but also go back all the way into the earlier part of your journey, of your story, and try to understand maybe how everything was back then, and from there start building down to the present. So how was your childhood? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small city called Oakville, which is actually just outside of Toronto, Canada. I tell everybody in Germany I'm from Toronto because nobody really knows where Oakville is on a map. We live in the greater Toronto area. And I grew up with my mom and my two siblings. She was a single mom raising two kids. I would visit my dad every other weekend and once a week for dinner. And we were really big into the outdoors and adventures. And to be honest, I was never on an airplane until I was 16 years old. So travel really wasn't even in my vocabulary back then. So I could have never guessed I am where I am today based on my childhood.
And would you say that from the memories that you have or learning that you have, do you think that there are some traits from back then that you still carry with you that really define you, and that you would say that are really the strong driver to even push you, bringing you the projects you're driving as of today?
100%. As a single mom raising three kids, my mom was always very persistent about us being raised independently. Knowing how to fix a dishwasher, knowing how to do everything on your own, because she couldn't do everything for us. She was not this helicopter mom that many of us are today. And this was probably the biggest blessing I could have ever asked for, because she really raised us, and she always says it in this exact way: I raised you to grow wings and to fly wherever you dream of. And I was very stubborn, because when I had first met my husband, this is kind of like the connection to everything, and it's all going to make sense in a second. But I met my husband in South Africa when I was traveling. I was just started my travel blog, and he was German, and I never thought that I would meet a German, fall in love, move to Germany. And I was actually very, very hesitant, because I said, I'm never going to give up my life. I was working in marketing. I was working in Toronto. I had on paper really the perfect life there. I wasn't necessarily very happy. I was actually quite the opposite, but I could never picture myself just uprooting and moving to Germany for a boy. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And so my mom was really the driving factor to say, Jenna, you can do this. Like, I raised you to grow your wings and to do whatever you want to do. And having that confidence and that support behind me was really what brought me here. And it was the struggle that I first had in Germany that led me to then become a full-time travel creator, because I couldn't find any jobs. I lived in Freiburg in my first year.
Okay.
And I couldn't find a job. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to travel, write about my experiences. And every step of the way from then, that point forward, it's really just been a snowball effect. Like, I never knew where I was going to be the next year, but every single year my business changes a little bit. This year it's okay, we're niching down. We're focusing on families. So yeah.
And thanks for being so open about that, because one of the points, and also for those listening, that I like to get from this kind of answer is that sometimes when you see you see people starting their own business, driving startups, making them scale up, or even bigger businesses later on, people think, okay, this person probably knew since he or she was a kid exactly what they wanted to achieve. But then I think that you really realize that sometimes you just really don't know, and it's just the journey that takes you step by step to leading or building up where you currently are. So no, that's quite interesting to hear how you ultimately got where you currently are.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. For me, I knew I wasn't happy where I was, right? And so I think it was that push of just this every day, 9 to 5 grind, and me just being totally not happy with where I was, that pushed me to make this huge change. And it really is amazing. We're a lot stronger than we realize.
But something I wanted to also check with you then, and maybe starting to dive into some of the skills that you developed on those years, was that, as you mentioned, you were working on marketing back home. Then you were in South Africa. You were working as a travel blogger. And there was a lot of effort and work on the areas of content creation, blogging, social media, and so on. Where did you, I saw that you did a certification back then on that, but how does one becomes good at content creation? How does that process looks like, and what do you like, what you don't like from that?
Think, honestly, content creation is all about practice. I mean, you're going to get that person every now and again who is just like a naturtalent, like natural talent. They can do whatever and they look good on camera. But for me, that just simply wasn't the case. I was blogging for a very long time. I go back and I read the first blog post I ever published, and I was like, this is awful. So it really was a process, it's not one of those like overnight successes. And my first YouTube video, I was terrified, and everybody told me, just do it. Like, there's no better time to do it than today. Like, you don't have to have good equipment. You don't have to have the planner and know exactly what you want on script for this video. You just need to practice speaking in front of the camera. And now, like, you don't realize, but I look back, 5-10 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I was so shy. Like, the way that I express myself on camera, I'm like an entirely different person, and I had no idea. I always thought, oh, this is who I am, but it's all about practice. I mean, I can say yes, I took marketing and I studied entrepreneurship in university, and probably some of that groundwork that I learned helped me along the way. It learned to teach me what exactly I was passionate about. But in reality, it's always a learning process every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that process. Probably you, me, some other people decided one day, okay, this is something that makes sense to try to give it a try, could be fun. And then there are many pieces that probably were never released and are even more awful than the ones you thought back then that's good enough. But if you look back, they are maybe not so good enough. But it's, of course, just to get the ball rolling and gain experience, like you mentioned, right? But there is a difference between engaging on creating content and then seeing how that goes, to building, as I was mentioning at the beginning, a follower base of almost 70,000 people on YouTube. I was looking today again on Instagram, 21,000 live in Dusseldorf, 34,000 live in Germany. So that's quite actually a big follower base. So if you look back at this whole process, so one thing it's how you actually behave in front of the camera, but how do you manage to build such a follower base?
I wish I had the secret recipe for this. I do. I have to be honest. I had originally created the YouTube channel in hopes to promote my Life in Germany Welcome Program, this 9-hour course that takes you step by step through everything you need to know, from getting your visa to landing your first apartment, decorating your house, making friends, whatever. All of this included. And I thought, okay, I'm finally going to tap into the YouTube market, and I'm going to promote my program in every single video. But in order to practice, I wanted to have a little fun first. And I had seen a couple girls, like I mentioned, there was only a few of us on YouTube back then. One of the girls was Antoinette Emily, and she's from New Zealand, and she was YouTubing. And I just loved her. And I loved how relaxed she was in front of the camera. And she would just chit chat about what's going on in her life. So basically kind of swapped it up. Like, one video would be an informational video about, the best banks that year in Germany for expats. And then the next one would be my culture shocks. Like, back then, this was new. Now it's like totally oversaturated. But I really lucked out in the YouTube market. Like, I got on board before COVID. And when COVID hit, that's when everybody started YouTubing and creating these cultural shock videos. And then it became saturated, and people just don't grow as fast as they used to, unless they niche down. Like, there's also this one girl, for example, who creates similar content that isn't niched down, but she does it in German. Like, she's an American speaking German in her YouTube videos, which is a niche itself. So she hit that perfectly, right, at the perfect moment. And she just grew like crazy. But for many people, it's just it just doesn't work. No, and you're doing the same videos as I created, 5 years ago. It's just not the right time. So there's a lot of luck within it. But of course, it's also persistence, right? So I think everybody says this and it's very cheesy, but if you're not passionate about what you're posting about, and if you niche down too hard where you're like, okay, I'm not interested in this anymore, then then it's going to be hard. And so for me, niching down to this family content, I'm totally aware that in, 10 to 15 years, when my kids don't want to hang out with me anymore, I'm not going to need to create this content. But the good thing about having the name Life in Germany and Life in Dusseldorf is that as long as I don't move away,
it's still...
I can share my whole life. I can share, what happens when I go through menopause and I get my pension.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, cool to hear that.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe even going beyond, let's say, what you've built on your own channels, maybe it would be also interesting to hear from your side. How important do you think these skills are nowadays, considering the relevance of social media channels and so on? I was also hearing to a podcast last week, which was related to, it's not only a key part of how you can grow your brand, but even, like, I think you mentioned in one point, it's really important also, if you're thinking of starting a business, on how you start creating your own personal brand about yourself. And that's something that, like you were also saying, so it's not like, okay, I will just throw one post and I will call myself now a thought leader after I put one or two posts, but you really also need to have like the persistence and like the discipline to keep going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You also have to be willing to have a level of openness, right? Like, I don't share my kids' faces, zoomed in every once in a while. They'll be in the background running around or whatever, but I'm always constantly sharing what I'm currently going through. Like, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly, I'm always sharing that. And that's creating my personal brand so that people, really get to know me as a thought leader, like you mentioned, and that I do know what I'm talking about because I've been through these struggles. And that is right now one of the most important things. I think to be a content creator online on TikTok, for example, it's not always difficult. Like I said, if you find the right niche at the right time, you really don't have to be that talented. You don't need to know how to post-produce perfectly. You don't have to have all the expensive gadgets in order to do it. Most people nowadays film on their phone. But what you do need to do is to also think of it as a business, and make sure that you have all of these aspects in place. And I noticed that some of the most successful people who started, they've built their personal brand over many years. But as soon as they're ready to start a business, they know what they're going to do. They know exactly how to do it. Everything's perfectly organized and beautiful. And so that takes talent, actually turning a content creation hobby into a business is the hardest aspect, finding ways to monetize it, as we talked about.
Sure. Well, definitely quite interesting. And I think probably I could then engage and say, let's now focus the remaining time to make a whole conversation about content creation and so on, which is quite interesting as well. But maybe I will just put the break there. So for me, it was quite interesting then to hear, first of all, your background, then where or how the process was where you actually gained some of, or a really important skill that you're leveraging still as of today quite regularly. But considering that, then comes for me the next step, which was, again, connecting to what you mentioning. You got to know your husband while you were in South Africa, and then you decided to move to Germany. How it felt when you arrived in Germany? So how that experience went for you?
It was quite interesting. I always say the first year really wasn't the year where it really happened, because the first year in my mind was like a year of trialing out, seeing how our relationship was going to go. So my relationship with Germany was very superficial. Like, I was so excited. I was this super, young tourist. Like, I went to Oktoberfest and I did all the touristy things. I went to Neuschwanstein and concentration camps and everything. And I really lived my best life in that year and just absorbed the whole culture for all it is. And the frustration and the anger and the paperwork and stuff didn't really settle in until year 2, when we decided to uproot and move to Dusseldorf, because this is where my husband's family was. And we wanted to be closer to his family just to settle down and get started here. And that's when it really clicked in, and I was like, oh my God, this is for real. I'm going to actually have to like extend my visa and figure out like where we're going to live and pay taxes and everything. So and that was when I hit like the major learning curve. And that's kind of, I always say you go through this like wave of emotions as an expat, and there's different steps of it where like you're in this honeymoon phase at the beginning and everything's so exciting and lovely, and then you get the homesickness, and then you go back up where you're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing here, and I know how to speak German, and I can get around and so proud again, and then it goes down again, and at some point there's this moment of, do I leave or do I stay or do I go? And for me it was having 2 kids, so that's
Sure.
convinced me to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I can only, of course, each of us has its own experience. So, I mean, I told you I was coming from Peru in 2015, and then yeah, similar set of experiences, a bit lost. Well, back then, I was already together with my girlfriend, now my wife, and that was definitely helpful. But still, with all support, you need to get used to other systems, other culture, other surroundings, and that's definitely a shock or a cultural shock, and things you need to get used to if maybe they catch you on guard. So like you said, probably first year for you was still getting to know around, enjoying more as a tourist. But let's say once you came to all of these realizations, what would you say were like maybe like the 1-2 top shocks that you actually had when trying to establish in the country?
Definitely the legality behind it, the paperwork, the immigration office, starting my business, just really coming to terms with like how things are done here in Germany. I'm not like, I've been here now 10 years and going to the doctor still makes me so nervous because I feel like I can't explain myself properly in German because they speak so fast. They don't give you the time of day. Like all of that stressed me out.
Mm-hmm.
So starting the business and all the paperwork, but then also the people, I love them, but sometimes they also drive me crazy. It's definitely a different country in comparison to Canada. So once you really settle down and live here, that's when that, like I said, this like frustration kicks in and you're like, why can't you be nicer? Like, why can't you smile? Or why can't you apologize? And then it takes a little bit. Like it took me probably 9 years to really come to terms and understand some of these things. Like this is why they don't apologize. And there's actually like a very deeper meaning behind that than people realize. Like they're not just being rude. It's there's a deeper understanding behind that even most Germans don't know.
Yeah, I was, now that you mentioned that and what's actually the meaning, we were having different conversations at work last year, also using as a basis, maybe you heard this culture map book from Erin Meyer. So what it's basically analyzed within this book are different dimensions in which you can assess how different cultural backgrounds actually take up certain topics like decision making or conflict or relationships or and so on. And that's where you quite straightforward see how, for example, people from like Latin America are quite totally at the different opposite, like people from Germany, for instance,
Yes.
when it's about directness or how do you give feedback and so on. And what it was quite interesting for that for me was that, or at least what this book was sharing, is that when people from Germany want to give you feedback so directly, is just to make sure that you get all the details and you don't misinterpret them.
Yes.
While in other cultures, it's rather more, there is a contextual setting, and that you are also able to infer some things, and you rather start going around instead of telling things like they are. Yeah, that's indeed something that you maybe, if you don't put enough time to reflect, they hit you, and then you actually start viewing it from the wrong view or the wrong eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once you can really get to the root and understand why things are the way they are, I think that's when you start to gain that appreciation for, I think you might be able to agree that after 10 years of living here, you realize, I do like this directness, because then I go back home and I'm like, oh my goodness, like stop beating around the bush, like we like to say.
Yeah. No, agree. So there are definitely things for me that I see now happily having inherited them from German culture. So now it's a combination, of course.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly. But then, let's say, as you were engaging in this process, like you mentioned, and you mentioned that at the beginning, is probably where you realized I'm myself having a struggle, and that's normally the process in which entrepreneurs come with these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably that led you to, there is a gap, I want to fill it. And was that the reason why you decided to start with life in Dusseldorf?
Yes, I'd say that was definitely the major thing. And I always knew that through my, career, my university days and learning about, you always find that gap in the market and then you fill it. And that's usually where you find the most success in a business. For me as well, though, I was working in marketing. I was working for Fortune 500 companies, and I was basically making these massive corporations more money. It didn't make me feel good, and just seeing my dad and my stepmom, they were police officers, and my mom was a special needs teacher. My sister's a teacher as well, and my brother is a tattoo artist, and he helped cover up, people's scars so that they can make it something beautiful. And I just thought, what am I doing? Like, I want to make a difference. I want to be here on this earth to actually change the way that other people live. That was exactly my hope, really, with life in Dusseldorf. I just didn't realize it was going to be this big. And I get every day now emails from people just being like, you don't realize how you as an individual changed my entire life. Like, it's so incredible to see hundreds and thousands of people who have moved to Germany because of me. And nobody's really, emailing me after being like, oh, you screwed me over. Like, why'd you convince me to move? Because I'm very honest. I tell them the worst parts about living in Germany, but I also tell them all of the amazing things being here. And I think this, for me, has been, game changing. It's just, I'm finally able to say that I've really made a huge difference in people's lives, and I get that confirmation on a daily basis. And as hard as it is being an entrepreneur, and some months you just go making no money and then the next month you make a ton, it's those emails and those messages that come through that just remind me, okay, this is why I'm doing it.
All right. No, that's really nice to hear that indeed you kind of found or it's driven by an actual purpose. And it's similar to what like you were saying. So when you're working on creating content, you need to be passionate about it. If you're driving a business, then you need to have ideally a purpose, because that's also part of the engine that keeps you going forward, right? It's not really easy to just keep going on. But you started with life in Dusseldorf, and like you mentioned, it became or got to a size now that you probably at the beginning were not really planning with. But how does one build a community?
Really, truly being there, being present and being interactive. And I see there's this one girl in Dusseldorf, for example, who runs one of the mommy groups. And she's just incredible. Like, she's so talented with what she does. And she doesn't have a big following right now, but you just know she will go places, on social media, because she knows how to harness this community and how to really interact with them, and constantly every day, asking questions and interacting. And this is the core of it all, really. Like, I don't do it as much as I would like, to be honest, but I try, not just to spit out content, but also to be like, how are you guys feeling? Or like, what were your culture shocks regarding this particular topic? And then sharing their answers with the community, because that's even more interesting. I share very personal things too. Like, I was super sick a couple weeks ago, and I apologized, for not being there, and just opened up and explained like why. Again, this is my personal brand, so that they understand what I'm going through. And then I just got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments with all of these tips and suggestions on what I should do. And then people being like, can you share these with me too? And in reality, it has nothing to do with life in Germany. But just the simple fact that I'm sharing, all of the information that comes my way, that has helped me as well, builds my personal brand and builds this sense of community that makes people want to come back and interact with me again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was also reading something some days ago that if you look back at some years ago, the kind of how video vlogs were done and the kind of content, everything was probably, I would say, it was authentic. So people were building their brand. Also, I'm thinking of the kind of how things were being edited before. It was just like plain somebody recording him or herself and then going up, and people like that. Then over the years, getting this, let's say, the attention span getting shorter. and then increasing the amount of editing that goes into production, then you actually were thinking, okay, how do I keep somebody entertained? But then at the end, there was also this element, which was again coming back, element of authenticity. It's something that people is appreciating and seeking always, and that's something that sounds indeed what you're doing here. And of course, you see that people is reacting positively back to that, and that gives you that may a further proof that that's actually the way to go to continue extending that community, right? So
Yeah, I also think it's a blessing. You've got Instagram, for example, and when you have stories, they're 24 hours. So I never look back at whatever I've shared. I'm just like, I don't care if I had something in my teeth or my hair wasn't brushed or whatever. It's on there for 24 hours. It's okay. And it kind of gives you that peace of mind knowing that if you really want to do this post-production and put together a perfect piece, then post it as a reel, right? And so you can still have a bit of both, but being authentic and being raw is still so important. And that's really what I use stories for.
all right. But once you started with this community, was it something you started in Facebook as a first point? And how were the steps then to say, okay, I will now offer this, or I will now offer consultation? So which offerings were you developing step by step?
There was never a plan in place from the get-go, honestly.
Right.
Like, the most amazing thing about life in Dusseldorf and life in Germany is that from the get-go, the one thing that I stood true to is that it was a community project. So
Okay.
because I had been a travel blogger and I already knew how to create a blog and open a website and whatever, I thought, I'm going to create life in Dusseldorf because I'm also struggling. So I'm not the expert here. I'm not saying, here are the 10 best places to visit in Dusseldorf. I'm asking the experts in Dusseldorf if they want to write the blog post and I can feature their business. And so this was the idea, essentially, was I was going to gather all this information for myself and then share it with the rest of the community. And it went so well that the first contributors were like booked out solid with expats for like,
Okay.
taxes
Okay.
and beauty and whatever. And it was truly amazing to be able to see that. And so this sense of community has allowed me to figure out, okay, what comes next, right? So these consultation calls simply came because I had so many people asking me, can I jump on a call with you? And I had done it a few times before. And when we're talking about, building this sense of community, I try to respond to every single message on Instagram. It's getting overwhelmingly too much now. I spend at least like 2 hours at night in bed responding to people. And I actually stopped typing to most of them. And now I do audio notes because it's so much easier. And my kids are screaming in the background, or they're pulling on my leg, or they're giggling and snuggling. And yeah, it's just me. It's raw, but people seem to really, really appreciate that too. So, and through that, they share, this is what I need. This is what I want. And Life in Germany was built because I had actually built up this welcome program for people moving to Dusseldorf. And then I had so many people say, can I buy the program if I'm moving to Stuttgart or München or Frankfurt? And I was like, well, no, but a lot of it is quite similar. So I can make one that's more broad and Germany wide and really go down into details like the cheapest cities that you can be and like where you're going to pay the most money and even like down to the garbage bins and understanding how they work, like and mentioning, they're mostly the same color, but not all of them. So really kind of like sharing the differences among states as well. And I thought, well, I have to call it something. What am I going to call it? Life in Germany, of course. And it just kind of goes from there. And then I've had so many one-on-one calls with so many parents. So I'd say like 95% of my calls are people with children. And yes, they want to know about the visa and how they're going to do at work and everything. But most of the conversation revolves around their children. And then I thought, what am I doing with these consultation calls when I could really put together a series of books that teach the children and the parents exactly what to expect, but in a fun way. So having these books that at the end, there's actually interactive activities and a parental glossary that goes into more detail about these cultural aspects that they're going to face on their first day of school or their first day of Kita or their first Christmas in Germany. And so it's a fun way to like kind of instill all of these cultural norms into their minds. And that's all been inspired by the community.
Wow. That's really nice. And maybe I will yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned that, I wanted to ask you about the process of that you're following right now to create a book, to create a series of books. So In which part of the process are you? How is this journey going for you so far?
So far, so good. I'm not, but to be honest, I have never written a book in my life. I never considered myself an author. I'm writing these books right now. The plan is to have 12 to 15 of them in the series right now. I have all of the titles worked out and the concepts for each. And then basically what I do is it's a process. So before I write the book, I go onto Instagram. I tell everybody, this is what I'm working on. Let me know. Like right now, I'm working on the Christmas book. And so today I just posted asking everyone, what are the coolest things that you learned about a German Christmas? Like for me, it's the Advent side, the Advent time and the 4 candles that you light and Saint Nicolaus and putting your boot out and celebrating on the 24th instead of the 25th. And so I want to incorporate all of these little things in the book, but I also want to hear it from people from other cultures too. And so that's been kind of the process I'm on. We're halfway through writing the books. And when it comes to what I'm going to do after, I have no idea. I've never published a book. I'm probably going to self-publish on Amazon. I have a few people who I know who have self-published, so I'm going to definitely pick their brains. I'm praying that I can find the strength and the connections to reach out to, migration integration departments and some educational funds maybe to try to get this supported financially or even to have an educational publisher to help me there. But I'm basically just taking it day by day. I've reached out to a couple illustrators who illustrate kids' books, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's incredible, really, again, by going back once more to how you start all this process. As you go through all of these projects, then you are expanding and expanding your skill set, your knowledge, and so on. That's what keeps this whole journey quite fun as well, right? So probably if you think back, I'm not sure if you were at one moment thinking, I would like to write a series of books under this scope at one moment, but it's just where the journey took you now.
Exactly. And I always say, university was great, but I've learned so much of what I know now just through the process of being self-employed and having to learn. I take courses all the time still.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Something that you also shared, and that I saw in a YouTube video I was looking on a person that was talking about the whole process of getting leads into your business and so on. And then the power of having a community that is actually available there to do validation, for example, of your ideas or validation of what you were just mentioning, what should I include on the books or not. That's something that it's maybe, depending on who you talk to, underestimated. But it's so important because when you actually then decide to launch something, it has already been validated, market tested from people that you're actually planning to position it to.
Right.
And that's extremely valuable for the process, right?
Absolutely. And I'm always one to keep things under wraps. And it was actually only until last week when someone sat down with me and was like, Jenna, what are you doing? Why have you not told your audience about this? And I'm like, well, because I want to surprise them, or I don't want anybody to take my idea, because it really is. It's not been done yet. It's something, there's no educational books in different languages that talk about the German culture to help integrate children. It's just, it hasn't been done. And I thought, oh my God, I've had it in the past. People steal my work and it is not a good feeling. But then you do just kind of have to trust the process and just hope for the best, because what I realized is, this woman was right. I do have to share it with my community and get this validation from them in order to know, am I even, spending time on something that people want? And so I finally released it, and I've got such amazing feedback from so many people, and I'm very, very, very thankful.
That's great. That's great to hear. But then maybe I go back a couple of steps, because so I was scrolling through the notes. I realized, and probably people hearing by now, they already realize what life in Germany it's standing for. But maybe just wanted to give you a couple of minutes to, again, summarize or concretely, as of today, what's the concrete offer from life in Germany. So we talk about a community, we talk about consultations, we talk about a relocation package. I let myself get nurtured by your mailing campaigns and what you're offering, just to learn about it. But maybe you can just summarize again concretely, what's the offering of life in Germany as of today?
It's really this all-in-one space where you can come, whether you're a family or an individual at the moment. You can come to the website, you can come to any of our social channels. And what I like to say is, I'm not the expert here. I mean, yes, I've been here for 10 years. I've gone through it all, but I'm not claiming myself as some glorified expert. For me, the most important thing is that I work together with the experts. I validate the blog posts that I write, and I'm working together with them so that when somebody actually needs help, I can always guide them in the right direction. So I love to think of it as just being like your best friend over here in Germany who's been there, done that, and who has the connections that I've spent the last 10 years building these connections so that you don't have to go through the same issues and problems that I struggled with, and then you can make your life in Germany a breeze. And I say that because Germany, I've lived in other countries before, and Germany is one of the harder ones to appreciate and comes to terms with, but it's also one of those countries that once you get past all of that paperwork and the difficulty of understanding the Germans, you know, and in their culture, it is such a beautiful place, but it's so difficult to get there and to really be at peace. And once you get there, it's amazing. So I want to be that factor that just like gets them over that tough stage so that you can see everything that Germany is and what it stands for.
Mm-hmm. All right. No, thanks for sharing. That's maybe another question that I had, that was, as you mentioned, you cannot carry because it's really impossible. And I think that also from my side, I realize I will do this by myself. I will probably do my tax declaration completely, and I will learn all the tricks to be the master of it. But I realize with time that you just don't have enough time to do that. Therefore, there's people that you can ask for support for that. For that, there are many other people you can reach out to be able to connect the dots, to be able to place the knowledge that people actually need. But how do you build this expert network then? So how was the process?
Been through my community.
Right. Okay.
I've never really actually gone out there and searched for something in order to add them to our platform as one of the experts. They've all been very natural connections, which I've been very lucky to have. So, for example, I share a lot in our welcome program based on whether you're self-employed, whether you have children or don't, depending on how old you are. Different information might be valid for you. So we go through it all in the program. But what a lot of people want to know is, how do you live your life, Jenna? So I try to simplify that now on social media so that people, because I've developed this personal brand, people want to know about me. So a lot of the brands or companies that I have my contracts with, for example, like my phone plan or my insurances, like all of these topics, I've now built very close relationships with these companies because I loved them before I started promoting them, right? Mm-hmm. Many of them are affiliates, not all of them, but most of them are. And it's a nice feeling knowing that you're promoting something that you stand behind, that you're paying for, you know, and that's what the people wanted. So it's kind of just how we've been able to develop, is like even my electricity, for example. I found it through some ads, I think, on Instagram, and then I checked them out, and then I signed up, and then I fell in love with them, and then I wrote them an email. I was like, okay, we got to meet. Usually the first stepping stone for us is an interview on YouTube, because I have a section which is Meet the Experts. And if I love them, then I'm like, okay, we need to do more together. And I have this checklist, actually, this partnership checklist that we go through for our core affiliates. And now we've really narrowed them down to some of my favorites, and they've really, really helped me. And that's why I've added them as experts on the site, because they're always there. They're answering all my questions. We're constantly having video calls. They're constantly updating me on what's new and what people need to know. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful to have them all on board, for sure.
All right, interesting. So I will pick on one of those points in a second. But what I had a notes, and I mean, now that you mentioned that you have a process to reach out to them, either by their community, or if you would like to build a further relationship, there are certain steps you're taking as well. But being close to this community takes time. Producing the content you need to produce takes time. Being to support the people and reply to comments, community management, so it takes time as well. What I didn't ask from your side is, how are you running all of this at the moment? Is it all a one-woman show, or how are you currently handling this?
Yeah. I don't know. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I am very, very disciplined. So like when I sit down at 8 o'clock in the morning, I work until I have to pick up the kids, like, and then the phone goes off. So being disciplined has been my greatest strength here, like just knowing exactly what I need to do that day and just having like these time slots for checking my emails and then the partner client calls and then the content creation, post-production, being very, very organized that way. However, one thing that, again, that I've also struggled with is really like being able to give up pieces of my business and allowing other people to manage them. Because it's my baby. It still is 10 years down the road. I'm so passionate about it. And the community is so close to me that it's very hard to introduce new people to the community. And yes, I could introduce them on the back end. We've tried that. I've had a couple girls help me with life in Dusseldorf for the most part. And one of them, or both of them actually, were featured then on the Instagram channel.
Okay.
And naturally, the views are a little bit lower when they're publishing because
Sure.
it's not the personal brand that people are awaiting on Life in Dusseldorf, but they've still done exceptionally well. So they have helped me a bit with the content creation. And I have to say, going back to artificial intelligence, this has been my savior over the last half year. In terms of content creation, repurposing content for different channels. TikTok, I just can't even get into TikTok because I'm so exhausted. I'm doing so much at once. So having these repurposing tools through AI has really, really helped me be able to share the content that I publish on Instagram over to TikTok, as well on YouTube Shorts, because I have slowed down a little bit on my long form videos on YouTube at the moment while I'm writing the books. So just being able to repurpose as much content from the past as I can while still updating, in my stories, what's really going on currently. But yeah, that's pretty much every now and again I have to hire a freelancer. There's one currently working on the back end of the website because I just give up. But yeah, mostly a one-man show.
I mean, I think all of those things, and you've of course pushed yourself to where you are, even before you actually started to get people to support you. Because these are things that if you dedicate the time, if you get familiar with one tool, then it becomes easier to get familiar with the next one and the next one. But still, all of this stuff requires time. And that's something that I'm realizing, I mean, from my current experience as well. So sometimes you could say, all right, I will make a video and then I will post it here and here and here. But even the approach tackling different platforms is different.
Totally.
And it's just not like downloading, cutting something and uploading the same thing everywhere with the exact same text. So that's where I also have lots of respect when I see that people are managing all these channels in parallel at the same time. But that's also something that I wanted to ask you. Is it the case that from what you've seen so far, it makes sense really to try to split yourself across all of these channels just to say I'm present everywhere? Or does it make sense to really focus maybe on the one, two, and really try to establish yourself?
That's a really good question. And it's a sensitive topic for me as well, because I was one of those people where I truly believed in putting all of your eggs in one basket and really like mastering that one space.
Okay.
For example, we talked about Facebook at the beginning, I have a community there of 17,000 people, and we were so interactive there and everything was so great. And then I had my Facebook pages, which were also very, very interactive. We had thousands of people, I think 25,000 people there. We had Life in Dusseldorf and Life in Germany and both community groups. And then my accounts were hacked.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was the year I gave birth to my second child, and I had spent the year being like the 9 months being pregnant, organizing everything so that a lot of the income would be then automated the next year. And because my accounts were hacked, I lost about 75% of my income.
Wow.
It was the hardest part of being an entrepreneur. And I looked up so many insurances and I was just trying to find some way to protect myself. And in Germany, there's no insurance that's going to protect you against hacking on social media because it's just too frequent. And I fought and fought and fought for months and months and months. I had lawyers, I had contacts beyond belief in Meta on Facebook, and nothing worked. And it was exhausting and brutal. And that's when I realized, okay, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You should be everywhere. And even like I said, I'm not big on TikTok right now. And yes, videos do have to be a little bit different for each platform. And you're going to notice that one performs really well on one platform and not on the other. But one thing I've also learned I'm a perfectionist, and social media is not about being perfect. So it's okay, if you have to republish, like what I'm currently doing, repurposing my Instagram videos onto YouTube Shorts and TikTok right now. No, they do not perform as well as they do on Instagram. However, the way I need to look at it now is that I think I only have maybe like 2,200 followers on TikTok, but some of those videos get 10,000, 15,000 views. And that's 15,000 people who I otherwise would have never reached out to. So whether it's an extra one person or not, if I'm already paying for a platform that can repurpose that content with a click of a button, you're not losing, right?
Okay, interesting. No, that's an interesting take to it. So, and like you were saying, I think on the other hand side, we are in times that there are some tools or some automation that really allows you to be able to get that. But no, thanks for sharing. So that's actually interesting take.
Yeah, sure.
To that. Maybe going back to the topic of AI tools and so on, what else have you seen out there that you think it's quite could be quite useful or has potential to be useful, even though you have not tried it yet, but you know that something is out there that can help you?
That's a good question. I feel like I usually try out as many as I can. So all of the ones that I've found, I've tested. The most recent one was Opus Clip.
Okay.
Which is now taking my long form YouTube videos and cutting them into viral shorts. And then they can rate them based on their virality and whether they suggest using it or not. And then you can actually use that platform to schedule them onto all your social media platforms. So this one is a blessing. And basically, like, I don't have one that I haven't tested yet that I'm really excited to. However, I am just waiting and waiting and waiting for there to be a good AI tool where I can just upload my raw 40-minute YouTube video and have them produce it into a 10-minute video with B-roll and all of the edits that I need. My classic intro popped in there, like the hit the subscribe button little feature, and just allow AI to, really do it in your style. And so far, I haven't found it yet, but if anybody listening has heard of this, please share it with me. This is not my niche to be getting into or building, but I am waiting for somebody else to do it.
I will not maybe I will do what you were saying about standing behind a product once you tested it and recommended it, but I was also surprised when I was using the tool we're using right now, so Riverside, which is also offering some AI features that as I mentioned before, some years ago, I really was trying to do a video, edit it, and see how that looked like. So I did a little experiment. And then I was looking at the process on tools like Adobe Premiere Pro and all the steps you had to do to get something, because similarly, I have this topic that I try to make it perfect, but then maybe you don't need it. But then it's crazy to see how in these tools now with one click, you can remove pauses, you can remove filler words, you can improve the audio. And these are tasks that used to take lots of time. So at least I think the developments are going the direction to be able to support content creators to become more efficient more and more, right? So
absolutely.
Looking at the time and already just trying to pick a couple of areas. Maybe I want to ask you shortly what we discussed at the beginning as well, if you're open to share about that. So how do you think about the whole topic of monetization of your business? How do you think about the business model? Because on the one hand side, like you were mentioning, you try to balance, or you go in this process of understanding what you're offering. How do you really can play something extremely valuable for the people that are close to you or are part of your community, for example. But on the other hand, you also try to build a business at the same time. So how is this process of thinking about monetization paths and so on?
Total transparency, it's not easy. I actually earn a lot of the money, a lot of my income now doing what I'm not necessarily passionate about, which is a shame. And that's kind of what I'm really trying to work on this year, is building my own products so that I can promote them with full passion. My affiliates, super easy to promote because, like I said, I stand behind them because I'm their customer, right? So I have also, like I said, I have this core group of affiliates that I really, truly am passionate about. They come up in natural conversation. I promote them. So we earn a bit there. We earn a bit on the digital products. However, where most of my income comes from is paid ads within my YouTube videos.
Okay.
And sponsored reels and sponsored shorts.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them, I mean, many of them are new companies that I've never heard of before, but I always say, I've never heard of this company before, but I'm really excited to try them out. And then I kind of just test them out with my followers. So it's a very natural integration. So it's okay. But I really, truly like promoting my affiliates and my own products. So that's kind of what I've been struggling with and what I really would love to change. People are right when they say you need your own product, because you can have affiliates, and I've had affiliates from the get-go, from travel blogging days, but things change, cookies change, and Google's changing on a daily basis. And what I used to earn in affiliates, I earn probably 40% less, maybe even 50% less than what I was before.
Okay.
Because the cookies are now being blocked in some regions, and they're not being followed as long. And yeah, it's been very, very difficult. And had I put all my eggs into that basket,
Sure.
making that referral again, I would not be earning any money right now, right? So it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. So as a content creator, it's also really important to focus on monetization strategies, not just in one place, but everywhere. So these, paid in video ads, paid reels, paid sponsorships, affiliates, and then also having my own products. But
so
it's tough.
But it's incredible if you look into the digital space, all the opportunities that it brings. And then I think if I hear for all the current streams that you have, on the other hand, it's whenever you started to focus on one stream and then you made your first euro, and then maybe you started to earn your additional further euros on it, then you start getting more transparency on which are possible income streams, what's the effort that I'm putting on those, and what's the return that actually I get from each of them. And then allows you then to trying, testing, seeing what's the results, and then seeing where does it make sense to keep putting the effort. So, but what you're saying of having your own products and then really trying to think that further step forward makes total sense. But I think, as you were already sharing before, with the series of books that you're moving forward and so on, all the other ideas you're having, I'm curious to see where the journey takes you now in the next 12 months, in the next 24 months. That's going to be quite interesting to hear.
Yeah, I'm very excited, very nervous. I mean, you're never going to know the outcome.
Sure.
For me personally, I'm very good at promoting things that I love. But when it comes to my own products, I'm too modest, and I have a very tough time overly boosting them. So thankfully, with the Dusseldorf family guide, for example, I've had locals just talking about it like crazy, and I've just been screenshotting everything people are saying and sharing that, because that makes it 10 times easier.
Sure. No, I can imagine. And yeah, maybe in some years again, in the same way you were looking back and saying how I was thinking or doing stuff like this, probably in some years down the road, it's going to be similar.
Absolutely.
But cool. Then I wanted to ask you just a couple of final questions before we end up with today's episode. You are actually taking up lots of things, as you were saying, not only on the business side, but also on the family side. And you really need to be able to master at multitasking and being efficient with your time. But what do you try to do normally to disconnect? So where do you find your source to recharge your batteries?
For me, it's all about day trips. I love getting out with my family and exploring. And I mean, in reality, it's also helping me with my business at the end of the day too. So that definitely helps. But when I'm out exploring, I'm totally disconnected. Occasionally when I'm doing my filming, for example, if I find something awesome and I want to record it because I want to share it on social, I'm there. I'm not 100% disconnected sometimes, but I have my Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which are super creepy, but they film my content for me. And when I'm with my children and with my family and I really want to be in the present, I don't want them to see me on my phone either. That's
Sure.
an awful example of what I don't want them to become. So these glasses have been the most subtle way for me to just be oh, that was really cool. Let me quickly snap a photo and just kind of enjoy the rest of our adventure. But nowadays, I really just pack it all away. I don't look at my phone if I'm not at work. People hate me because I'm not responding to WhatsApp messages on time. But it's the only way that I can truly disconnect. And we love getting out in nature. We love hiking. We love just hopping in the car, hopping on the train and going to some beautiful, enchanted little half-timbered house value, in Germany, and Germany is just the perfect place for that too. So
that I can confirm. From, let's say, driving or working on your own business, what's really the for those listening, the biggest couple of lessons, or maybe one single lesson that you've got so far that you were maybe never thought about it, and now that you have went through it, you're experiencing that, you would say that's really something that I would like to share?
this is a very, very, very tough question. I mean, a unique stage of my business, I think. And like I mentioned, I've had a lot of hardship in the last years, having my accounts hacked and having to recreate a lot of it from scratch. It's really given me a newer perspective. So maybe this isn't like the most motivational speech to kind of
That's a bit to be.
end the call with, but it taught me a huge lesson. And for me, having kind of this backup plan, so especially as a content creator, so for anybody listening who's like, yeah, I want to create my own content, I want to have my digital products. For me, I need something physical. And this is exactly why I'm putting these books together, because if I lose everything tomorrow, which to be honest, it's not impossible. And I know I sound crazy right now, but this is kind of what I've come to realize and come to accept, that I have to be okay with it, or I have to understand that nothing is forever, and that maybe my channels will be hacked tomorrow, but I have something. And I still can't forget everything. Like we talked about, I learned in university, yes, but what did I learn the most? How did I learn the most of what I've learned today? It's through being an entrepreneur. So at the end of the day, everything is in here, what's online is not everything. So you could and you may lose absolutely everything tomorrow if you're not lucky like I was, but you always have to have this kind of backup plan, or understand that and come to terms with the fact that you have everything in your mind and you can do it again. You can do whatever you want. You just need the education that you've brought yourself over the years of being an entrepreneur. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, as said, I think throughout the whole discussion, you've also been, and I think there have been many interesting points, perspective from how your whole experience went so far. Just to maybe wrap up with one final question. I mean, I'm aware that people are listening to the podcast, either people living abroad, people that are already in Germany and are maybe, as said, they are not from a German background. And that was also one of the purposes behind the podcast, and to do it in English language. But what would you say are let's not make like a usual title from a video, not like the top 5 things, but let's say like the top 2 or 3 things that you actually appreciate the most as of today from Germany?
Things I appreciate the most: directness, as we spoke about, not beating around the bush. I do appreciate that, although it is very, very hard to make friends here in Germany, when you do make a friend, you make a friend for life. So they're really there through thick and thin. You can call them for anything. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in other countries. It's just you work damn hard for it here. So when you do get it, it's feels so good. And the biggest thing that I love here in Germany, and the biggest reason why I'm here, is this work-life balance is incredible here. I have to say, for me, having this time for my children, I wouldn't have had the same time for my kids if I was working in Canada. So it's just very, very different. And people really put a lot of focus on having a good quality of life here. And I respect that so much, and I'm just so thankful to be living in a country that supports us in that way and supports families so greatly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks a lot for being open for that. Reason why I'm also asking about this is, of course, as I mentioned, for the audience, as you know, before this episode goes live, there is elections coming in Germany in a couple of days. And also maybe from my side, I think that sometimes people tend to also follow a bit more this mindset of let's complain about this or let's complain about the next thing. But probably, like you were saying, similar from my side, I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that this country brings on a daily, weekly basis to us, and fully stand behind to what you were saying as points. And of course, there are other more. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing on that. And thanks a lot, as I was mentioning at the beginning, for joining the podcast today. I was really happy to learn a lot of things from how your experience, your journey has went so far. I think, as I mentioned, we could probably sit down and discuss on a couple of the points in more detail. So I was really happy to get all insights from your side. And I'm pretty sure that those listening in are able also to get a lot of insight in the same way that I did in this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much, Jenna, again for being in the podcast. And for those listening, thanks a lot for tuning in, and see you all in the next episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, I would really appreciate your support. So depending where you're listening to it, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast and leave any questions or comments. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you in the next episode.